Listen. So Smile was a movie that was being marketed everywhere, from trailers to billboards to baristas, but it was them hiring people to just smile at baseball games that really got to me.
Paramount apparently paid for actors to sit behind home-plated big league golf ballparks.
Imagine getting paid to see Pujols hit his 700th home run. Now, I'll be honest, I thought the idea looked pretty goofy at first and reminded me a lot of the Truth or Dare movie from a couple of years ago, but I was surprised that it wasn't that bad. Like, I'd seen Sosie Bacon, daughter of Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick, on a Prime show called As We See It, and I thought she was pretty good there as a caretaker, so seeing her character here really worked well, and I thought she killed it when it came to the Scream Queen part. Granted, if you know anyone who struggles with mental health issues, I'm not saying that, this is like promoted material, but it is effective in putting you through her turmoil, and for that, I think it's a solid horror movie. I think the visual effects are surprisingly great, and they went real. I wasn't expecting it to be as practical as it was, and I think for that alone, it makes it worth the watch. So, with the full spoiler warning out of the way, let me explain.
Put it on.
It's loading.
So the movie follows a psychiatrist named Rose who works 80-hour weeks. She has a fiance in finance, a sister who's her complete opposite, and a brother-in-law named Greg who gets on more people's nerves than the actual monster in this movie.
Ollie, all right. Bye.
The big thing happening in the film is a curse that's spread with a smile, which is kind of like the filmmaker's way of taking the biggest symbol known for kindness and then just literally flipping it on his head. Rose comes across it when she encounters Laura, played by the same actress who was in the original short for this movie, Laura Hasn't Slept, which I'll link down below. That was supposed to play at South by in 2020 before it got canceled, but somehow the short landed in front of a Paramount exec and bam, he got a feature. Here, the actress reprises a version of the role as she recounts witnessing someone getting hammered right in front of her without any alcohol.
It's like it wears people's faces like masks.
She then proceeds to do the creepy smile in front of Rose before telling a killing joke and then just splits right in front of her. And that's the tone of the movie. So now this curse is being played off as like a haunting, she's just getting taunted everywhere she goes. The director even made sure to make the statement that all of the smiles in the movie are non-CGI, so that kind of makes all of her encounters a little bit more creepy because she doesn't know if they're just random smiles or if there's something more sinister there. It mostly works because it's all in her perspective, so any crazy stuff that you see is really from her POV. It's of someone who can't explain the turmoil that she's going through, so I really like how the director shoots it. I also really like how he steps up his visual language, especially for a movie that's kind of critiquing language in this field.
I'm not crazy. Nobody's saying that.
Right, but she was a head case, yeah?
I'm sorry, a head case?
Yeah, she sounds fucking crazy to me.
Rose, there have to be plenty of crazies out there who will actually pay you for your time.
Thank you so much for your input, Greg. That's very sweet.
Do you hear yourself? I mean, Jesus Christ, you sound crazy.
I am not crazy! Sorry.
What are you, a fucking nutcase? You've been acting completely unhinged, and I didn't know what else to do.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Well, Charlie's a whole box of Fruit Loops, so good luck.
The setting of the hospital also adds like a bureaucratic side to things because she witnessed everything that happened with Laura and then she's still at work. Because it was 2021 when they were filming this, hospitals were a little bit busy and they had to build part of theirs from scratch, and they chose this pink color for the walls that older hospitals had claimed would help make the patients less violent. And ironically, it makes the movie more unsettling. Keeping to her POV, Rose ends up having an interaction with a patient named Carl who she imagines is yelling at her, with the camera even shifting to be head on at her point of view. But in reality, when they come to check on him, dude was just sleeping. So honestly, poor Carl is worse than before he got admitted, which I guess is kind of saying something.
She's gonna die, Mom's gonna die, I'm gonna die, everybody dies.
Rose's ex ends up being on the case since he just so happens to be a detective or a cop.
But there was a scene in our scene. Wasn't I a detective at one point? Didn't they cut that line out? And I saw the movie last night. I'm like, was I a detective?
One thing of note from a rewatch is how she's technically the one who split from him.
And so I put walls up and I kept people at a distance.
So his perspective is that of a dude helping the girl who dumped him as she's going off the deep end. She then goes off the deep end. Her fiance's always working late, so she's all alone. The cat's gone missing. She's not sleeping, but slurping, to the point that she trips her own security while making calls with no phone.
Hey, I wouldn't worry about it. These false alarms happen all the time.
On top of that, nightmares of her mother's death has led her back to her childhood therapist, who helps her as much as she was helping Carl.
Rose, from where I'm sitting, you don't seem delusional or disordered to me. And certainly not psychotic.
She's shaking. Ma'am, she was hiding in your stairwell. It's in these flashes, though, that you get to see how well they do the set design, because it really tells the story of these people who are falling apart on the inside, but trying to mask it on the outside.
That sort of like liminal space between the nightmare and waking up, you know, and how it kind of carries over and infects your life for the first few minutes that you're awake, even though the logical side of your brain knows that it's not real, it was just a dream, and yet you can't get rid of this sort of panicky feeling of doom.
We then get to the 7th birthday, and this is a scene that's just out of pocket. On the day of her nephew's birthday, she claims that she's being haunted by spirits, but everyone around her thinks she's just chugging them. Now imagine when she pulls up with a gift for the kid, and it ends up being her missing dead cat. With that being out of the bag, obviously everything crashes. At this point, her fiance's ready to take a train out of Dodge the first chance he can get, and it actually would have given him something to do, because he may be the one with all the money in the relationship, but he's got no character development. They pretty much just set him up to be there to react to audiences, and half of his scenes end up being a part of the deleted scenes where you actually get to see a little bit of the relationship and his work life. Like, there was even a prior discussion before he brings up her genetics and his future, but all of that got cut out. Sadly, it seems like all of that was missing in terms of character moments in exchange for building tension, and while it keeps the movie under 2 hours, I think the deleted scenes should have stayed, you know. But for a movie more like that, I'd say go watch The Night House. Here, it turns out that they argued so loud while filming this scene that the real neighbors had to call the cops for a noise complaint.
And I need you to know that I'm not crazy, okay?
Rose, you're talking about fucking ghosts.
In terms of the scares, there's a lot of jump scares in this. Like, it's guilty of a lot of cliches, but I was surprised how much it worked for me. Like, the whole score is composed from made-up instruments, so it sounds so abstract and just makes it eerie. They're sneaking in smiles like Watchmen everywhere they can in the movie. There's a bunch of match cuts visually and audibly that happen. So when you get things like this dark doorway scene, it was creeping me out, and it would have had me singing hymns in bed. On top of that, they also had a Laura MP3 jump scare. Like think about that. An MP3 jump scare. How they almost even got away with a circle transition.
The camera itself was woven into the script in a way that really stood out as its own character. You know, grabbing from, like, I think he's inspired a lot by 70s horror art house films, and I really appreciated the way he kind of elevated the camera language and like the visual tone of the piece embedded into the script in a way that felt, I don't know, really refreshing for something so contemporary.
In terms of the influences, the filmmakers had mentioned Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure and Todd Haynes' Safe, which I think really shares a lot of the same psychological headspace.
Yeah, it's about how to own your own life. You know, because it's like what he's saying is that we don't really own our own lives. We're taught what to do, what to think, but emotionally, we're not really in charge.
Both are pretty much movies that showcase what happens when you hide behind a lot of I'm fines.
Fine.
You okay?
Yeah.
You sure?
No, I'm fine. I was just venting.
Eventually, she goes to visit a previous victim's loved one who catches her up on everything, and they kind of did her dirty because the final image that they ended up leaving her with her husband is the scariest frame of this movie. She ends up telling her how people witness someone else killing themselves, and that's when it spreads, before taking her upstairs to a room of paintings that reminded me of this comic miniseries Bedlam that I read back in the day. I highly recommend it, but then gets kicked out because she didn't really reveal that she knew the girl who her husband saw.
Give me the name!
Get the fuck out of my house!
Now everybody knows that we're in the time of the year again where everybody just wants to Netflix and eat. And thanks to our channel sponsor Factor, you can do just that. If you've ever liked any LME ever, then you can literally support the channel by just eating food. They're the meal delivery service that sends you fresh, never frozen food right to your doorstep without all of the junk that usually comes with delivery. And especially right now during this season, all of the hassle that comes with prepping during the holidays. Every week, Factor has a variety of meals that you can choose from that are all chef prepared and gives you all the whole foods you need without actually having to go to Whole Foods. You can wait for takeout, or you can just take out a box and heat and eat in 2 minutes. And since it's chili season, you can get some chili season and scarf it as you Netflix and chill. All orders are customizable with a bunch of desserts, drinks, and snacks added all the time, and the boxes can be built big or small. So if you're interested, click the link in the description to get yourself 60% off your first Factor box when you use the promo code LetMeExplain60 over at go.factor75.com/LetMeExplain60. Again, if you want to support the channel by literally having dinner and a movie, then again, head on over to go.factor75.com/LetMeExplain60. Use the promo code LetMeExplain60 and get 60% off your first box.
I'm sorry, what?
She then goes to her ex's house and makes him work on his day off. And does she even say hi?
Fine, got rid of that ugly yellow couch.
Uh-huh.
She has him pull up security footage of a previous victim who wanted to cut gas prices but ended up slashing himself instead, and having it be on surveillance footage I know is a thing that filmmakers do to dupe the MPAA, but honestly it makes it even creepier. She eventually gets him to break more protocols and goes to visit the one guy who got away from the monster because he's the one man who didn't take his own life but killed somebody else. He breaks down more of the rules and how it's like It Follows meets The Ring. It feeds off of trauma in order to spread, and once you see it, you got 1 week in between before dying. But after 10 minutes of talking, I was wondering if Rose was just going to end it by saying, "Trauma, you're it," but I guess there's no tagbacks?
What is going on here? I'm so confused right now.
I like to think that it sort of enjoys toying with its victims and being as elusive and slippery as possible. I like to think there probably is a way to beat it, but I don't know. I mean, it's also quite inescapable.
Well, there goes all the how to beat videos. We then get to back cop-outs, which was a little too much. The first one is with her visiting her sister. That does lead to the scene that turned a lot of heads in the trailer, and even ends with the kid watching, so the nephew possibly will continue that cycle of trauma, as the movie continues the cycle of it all being in her head.
Did behavior even remotely aggressive?
Do you think that I'm making it up?
We get a couple more scenes with the therapist, who also isn't there, but, I guess it leads to one of the scariest scenes, of her driving with no sleep.
What the fuck?
There's then a visit to the hospital that's also half in her mind, as she considers killing someone else to end it, and decides to pick Carl? Like, what did Carl do to you? You'd think at this point they'd be done with all the fake outs, but no, they take another stab at it. But it does lead to one of the wildest effects in the movie, where they mix practical and CGI to show off this crazy face peel. That said, all the bait and switches do start to stretch your patience more than Penn stretches his skin.
Why?
The final scene takes place back in her childhood home, and also in her mind, as she visits the location we saw in the beginning of the movie.
Guilty.
This immediately takes Rose back to the day her mother died when she was 10, remembering the guilt she's carried for seeing her mother OD, but then choosing to not help her as she left her out to die.
Your mind makes it.
And it's that guilt of not helping her mom that led her to this line of work.
Well, I'm sorry that I'm actually trying to help people instead of being some fucking stay-at-home PTA housewife who lives in her own self-centered, smug little bubble!
We realize that everyone has had a memory or an incident prior to the smile curse hitting them, and that includes their absentee father.
It pretends to be someone that I know. Sometimes it's a random stranger. Sometimes it looks like my grandfather who died in front of me when I was 7.
That is Gabriel's brother. He died in an accident 20 years ago.
I was 10 years old! And you were a monster!
And that explains a lot of the mom's appearances, from the intro scene to the woman who was outside the hospital, because it turns out she also saw things that led to her demise and affected her daughters.
This is exactly what happened to Mom.
And now, Rose is the same age her mother was. She faces off with the entity and its faces as it follows her into the next room, revealing the best effects of the movie. Like, not only is it crazy to see how they blended everything behind the scenes, hiring the team from the Aliens movies, who they even homage in the movie, but it also adds an extra layer on the rewatch because you realize that everyone else was getting incepted and going through this procedure. It would have just been from their perspective.
Everything about her changed. It was like the person I'd been talking to was gone, and something else had taken over.
He kept saying it was trying to get inside of him.
There's something terrible inside of me.
Fun fact, the monster doesn't technically have a name in the movie, but they did refer to it as Lollipop on set, so I guess all those smiles ended up leading to cavities. And that credit song.
I would actually rather audiences get a chance to sort of name it themselves. You know, I think that's always been a fun thing in culture, where the audience sort of generates the name, and then that makes it into the canon.
After Professor Xing her and pulling another fake out, she locks the cop out, only to eventually get the cop in, and we see the entity take over Rosa's body and enter her as the movie shifts for the first time to a different perspective, that of Joel's.
Fine.
In the end, after gaslighting her more than Rosemary without the baby, she pours gas and lights herself up, leading evil to prevail besides all of their best intentions, as it passes on to Joel, who will now have to mask his trauma and hide behind his own smile.
my one day off.
Thank you all for watching, and I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Again, I would highly recommend The Night House if you like this movie. Surprisingly, even Russian Doll. There was a bunch of drone shots in this, and even the premise, I would also say, for The Empty Man. I think that was like a sleeper hit from a couple of years back that people would like. But I'm just curious to know what people thought of this movie, because it did really well in theaters, and I was just sitting like on Paramount. But I'm curious to know people's theories on this, on anything that they'd like to see for a future thing, because I feel like if they were to do a sequel, it'd be a spin-off, because Robert in the Prison mentions a Brazil incident, and I just feel like they're just gonna take it international.
There's been other chains in the past. Found one that was in Brazil a few years ago.
Other than that, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section, your theories, any Easter eggs, clues, or anything that you may have catched. I know to some people, being told to smile may be the biggest horror, so let me know your little biggest horror stories down below in the comment section, or any other movies you want us to cover. And until next time, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and that person behind you will leave.
Right, he's not just a cop,
Came to
he's a detective.
the
Oh no.